You know that migraine thing? That pounding pain, the sensitivity to light and sounds. Ugh, it's awful, right? But what if I said there's this kind of migraine, right, with all that awfulness, but instead of your head, like it's your stomach that's, taking the hit. Welcome to abdominal migraines.
Yeah, it's like a real head scratcher, huh? You get these, well, they're intense, these recurring pain episodes. Often it's like this deep throbbing feeling right in the gut.
And get this, with abdominal migraines, you don't actually get the whole head pain thing.
Nope.
So you can imagine what a puzzle this is for doctors trying to, figure out what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. And because of that, people can suffer for years, without a real diagnosis. They're going from like one specialist to another, getting all these tests for their stomach, but nothing really adds up.
It really makes you wonder, how do you even start to untangle something like that? The research we're diving into today, it points to a few key places to start. One thing that really jumped out at me was this idea that there might be a genetic component to abdominal migraines. That's always like a big aha moment for me, this idea that our genes could be, playing a part in something like
Oh.
this.
And it's not just like a general, migraines run in the family kind of thing. They're finding specific genes that might be involved in how certain neurotransmitters in the brain are, well, regulated. And remember, those neurotransmitters are like the messengers that control, well, pretty much everything our brain and body do.
Okay, so break this down for me. How could genes that are linked to brain chemicals be connected to pain in the stomach?
Okay, so picture this. If these specific genes aren't working quite right, it can mess up the balance of neurotransmitters. And that can set off a whole chain reaction, eventually leading to that abdominal pain we've been talking about. And it's not just about inheriting the condition itself, it's about how those genes might be influencing how your body reacts to certain triggers.
Oh, wow, that is fascinating. So genes might be setting the stage, but what actually tips the scales and triggers an abdominal migraine episode?
That's the million-dollar question. Sadly, there's not just one answer, but the research, it highlights some of the usual suspects when it comes to, well, triggers. And some of these might sound kind of familiar.
Let me guess. We're talking chocolate, caffeine, processed foods, all the good stuff, right?
Bingo. Those are some of the big ones. And what's really interesting? These triggers, they often overlap with the ones that trigger classic migraines, too. It's almost like there's a shared pathway somewhere in the nervous system that's being, well, activated in both cases.
Now, that is interesting. So it's not just about what we're eating. It's how our bodies, specifically our nervous systems, respond to those foods, maybe because of those genetic predispositions we talked about.
Exactly. And that's why something as simple as keeping a food diary can be so helpful, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Just track what you eat. And when you get those symptoms, you might start to see some patterns. You know what I mean?
Like becoming your own, food detective.
Right. Exactly.
Now, there's another trigger we got to talk about, stress. Let's be real. Who hasn't felt that knot in their stomach when things get a bit, overwhelming?
Oh, stress. Yeah, that's a big one. And the thing is, it could be both. A trigger A&D, a consequence of abdominal migraines. It's like a vicious cycle.
So what you're saying is the actual experience of having an abdominal migraine can actually cause more stress, which then makes it more likely you'll have another one.
Exactly. And this is where, the emotional and mental side of living with this condition, it really comes into play.
Yeah, that's so true. It's easy to just focus on physical symptoms, but the impact on, your mental health, it's real. So let's talk about that. What kind of support or coping mechanisms can help someone, deal with the emotional roller coaster of this condition?
Well, first of all, just knowing you're not alone, that can make a huge difference. Finding a support group online or even in person, it could be like a safe space, to share experiences and connect with people who really get it.
Yeah, there's something so powerful about connecting with people who really understand what you're going through.
Totally. And, on top of that, adding in stress reduction techniques to your routine can help a lot. We're talking mindfulness, meditation, deep breathing, even just spending time in nature, anything that helps, calm your nervous system down and quiet those racing thoughts.
Yeah, giving your brain a break, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit here, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, diagnosis. With abdominal migraines being so hard to pin down, where do you even begin?
You're right. It can be a really winding road to get a diagnosis. A lot of times it starts with a trip to your regular doctor, and they might send you to a specialist, like a gastroenterologist maybe, or a neurologist.
So what should someone expect at that first doctor's appointment? Are there specific questions they should ask or like information they should be ready to share?
Being prepared can definitely make things easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having a detailed history of your symptoms, like when they started, how often they happen, how bad they are, any triggers you've noticed, and don't forget to mention any family history of migraines.
That makes sense. It's like putting a puzzle together, right? The more pieces you have, the clearer the picture is for your doctor.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to advocate for yourself. If you feel like you're not being heard or your doctor's not taking your concerns seriously, it's okay to get a second opinion.
Speaking of advocating for yourself, what about those diagnostic tests? You mentioned before it's like a process of elimination.
Right. Because the symptoms can look like so many other things. Doctors, they have to rule those other possibilities out before they can, land on a diagnosis. So that might mean blood tests to check for infections, things like that. Imaging scans like ultrasounds, MRIs, those look at the organs in your abdomen. And sometimes you might need more specialized tests to check your digestive system, like an endoscopy or a colonoscopy.
So it can be like a really involved process.
It can be, yeah.
But the goal is to make sure nothing else is going on that could be causing those symptoms.
Exactly. Yeah. And, while it can feel overwhelming, just remember that every test gives your doctor more information to, put the pieces together.
Once other causes are ruled out and you have a diagnosis of abdominal migraines, then what?
Well, then it's time to figure out treatment. And just like the diagnostic process, treatment for abdominal migraines it's really personalized. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
So tell me more about that. What kind of treatments are usually considered?
Treatment often involves, a multi-pronged approach, something that addresses like the immediate symptoms, but also those underlying triggers. For some folks, over-the-counter pain relievers like ibuprofen or naproxen might be enough to handle the pain. But for others, especially if the episodes are really severe or they happen a lot, you might need prescription medications.
Okay, so let's talk about those prescription medications for a sec. Are we talking about the same kinds of medications used for, regular migraines?
Yeah, there can be some overlap. You might have heard of triptans. Those are often used for migraine headaches. Well, sometimes those medications can also help with the pain from abdominal migraines, too.
Interesting. And I'd imagine those NSAIDs we were talking about, those non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, those could also be helpful for, managing the pain and inflammation, right?
Definitely. And sometimes your doctor might even consider putting you on a preventative medication, especially if the migraines are happening frequently or really messing with your life. These are meds you take regularly to try to lessen how often they happen or how bad they are.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're trying to build a wall to try and stop those migraine attacks.
Exactly.
But medication is just one part of it, right? We talked about lifestyle changes earlier, and I'm curious, how do those fit into the treatment plan?
You're absolutely right. Lifestyle changes are, they're essential for managing abdominal migraines.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they can be just as effective as medication, especially when it comes to preventing future episodes.
So remind us again, what are those key lifestyle tweaks that can make a real difference?
Well, going back to those triggers, right? Diet is huge. Figuring out what those trigger foods are for you and actually cutting them out, that can be like a total game changer.
It's like, that saying knowledge is power. You got to know what's setting these migraines off before you can, actually do something about it. So besides diet, what else can people do to, get some control over this?
Sleep. Don't underestimate sleep. Aim for, a solid 7-8 hours every night. It might sound like too simple, but honestly, it can really impact your whole health, including how likely you are to get those abdominal migraines in the first place.
And of course, we can't forget about managing stress, finding those healthy ways to deal with it, right? Whether it's meditating, doing some yoga, getting out in nature, or even just chilling with a good book, that can make a huge difference.
You got it. It's about figuring out what works for you and then actually making it a regular thing, Now, while those lifestyle changes, they're the foundation for dealing with abdominal migraines, there are some alternative therapies that some people find useful too.
Okay, now you've got me curious. Tell me more about those. What are we talking about here?
Acupuncture is one,
Yeah.
Where they put those thin needles in at certain points on your body, and it's supposed to get your energy flowing better. The research on it is still a bit iffy, but some studies do say that it can help make migraines less frequent and not as bad.
So it might not be a guaranteed fix, But it could be a helpful tool for some people to have, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Biofeedback is another technique that can be helpful. It basically like teaches you how to control certain things your body does, like how tense your muscles are or your heart rate. And that can be really useful for managing both, like stress and pain.
Oh, interesting. So it's like you're almost like retraining your brain to react differently to those triggers.
Exactly. Although it is important to keep in mind that, well, just because something is, labeled as like natural or alternative doesn't mean it's automatically safe or that it'll work for everyone.
Good point. What should people keep in mind then? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's always the best idea to talk to your doctor before you try any new therapy,
Yeah.
especially if you're, already on medication.
Yeah, that's really important. Always better to be safe than sorry, and check with a healthcare professional and make sure there aren't any risks or bad interactions or anything like that.
Couldn't agree more. And, at the end of the day, dealing with abdominal migraines, it's a journey. It's not like you just cross a finish line and you're done. There'll be good days and bad days. But if you have the right info, the right tools, the right support, you can manage it. You can take control of your health and live a good life, a full life.
This has been, wow, such an eye-opening conversation. We've really gone deep into abdominal migraines, from the possibility of genetics links to the surprising role of stress and everything in between. Is there one big takeaway you hope listeners walk away with today?
I'd say even though abdominal migraines they can really knock you down, if you understand what's going on, you know your triggers, and you get the right treatment and support, you can manage it, really. You don't have to suffer in silence. Talk to your doctor, explore what's out there, and remember, you are not alone in this.
That's so well said. If abdominal migraines have been this mystery you've been trying to figure out, hopefully this deep dive has given you the knowledge and, the courage to take that next step. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and never underestimate how powerful it is to advocate for your own well-being.